is something happening right now that most people will never notice. The world keeps spinning, the noise keeps rising, and the crowd keeps moving in the same direction it has always moved. But you stopped. Something inside you pulled you here, held you still, and would not let you scroll past. That was not the algorithm. That was not coincidence. That was the hand of God pressing pause on your life, long enough for heaven to speak directly into your ear. But before anything else is said, you need to hear this as a warning. Not a gentle nudge, not a soft suggestion, a warning. Because there is a version of you that has heard messages like this before. A version of you that felt the fire, felt the pull, felt something shift deep in your chest, and then walked away unchanged. You went back to the same bed, the same thoughts, the same cycles, the same quiet desperation dressed up as a normal Tuesday. And the weeks became months, and the months became years. And somewhere along the way, you stopped asking why your life feels like it is moving but never arriving. That is the cost of staying asleep, not the dramatic cost you see in movies, the slow cost, the invisible cost. The cost of another morning where you wake up and feel the same heaviness sitting on your chest before your feet even touch the floor. The cost of another conversation where you smile and say you are fine when something deep inside you is screaming that you are anything but fine. The cost of another year where the gifts God planted inside you stay buried because the noise of this world is louder than the voice that is trying to call them forward. You have been in this cycle. You know what it feels like to almost break free and then get pulled back. You know what it feels like to sense that you are meant for something more, and then talk yourself out of believing it before the sun goes down. That cycle has a name. It is called delayed obedience. And delayed obedience is not neutral. It is not simply waiting. Every day you stay inside the cycle is a day your assignment goes unfinished. Every season you spend repeating the same patterns is a season someone who needed what you carry goes without it. The scripture says it plainly in the book of Romans, chapter 13, verse 11. And do this, understanding the present time. The hour has already come for you to wake up from your slumber, because our salvation is nearer now than when we first believed. The hour has already come. Not the hour is approaching. Not the hour will eventually arrive. The hour has already come. Heaven is not waiting for a more convenient moment in your calendar. God is not holding this message for a version of you that has everything figured out. He is speaking now to the version of you that is tired, uncertain, and sitting exactly where you are. And so before you move another inch through this message, before you let the next word land, you need to make a decision. Not a dramatic public declaration. A quiet, bone-deep decision in the place where no one else can see. A decision that says, I will not walk away the same. I will not let this be another moment I felt something and did nothing. I will not stay in the cycle. If that decision is rising in you right now, if something in your chest is nodding even before your mind catches up, then type the number 112 in the comments right now. Not because a number has magic in it, but because the act of declaring it makes it real. Because heaven sees what you type just as clearly as it hears what you whisper in the dark. 112 is your first act of obedience in this moment. Do it now and then stay with me, because what comes next will begin to explain everything. You were born into a battle you did not choose. You arrived in a world that was already at war. A war not fought with weapons you can hold in your hands, but with frequencies, with attention, with the slow erosion of everything God placed inside you before you drew your first breath. And the enemy has been extraordinarily patient. He did not come for you with fire and obvious destruction. He came quietly, through exhaustion, through distraction, through the thousand small voices that told you to be realistic, to be practical, to stop dreaming so loudly. But God has been patient too, more patient than you know. He has been watching you carry what you carry. He has seen every sleepless night. He has heard every prayer you were too tired to finish. He has been present in every moment you felt completely and utterly alone, even when you could not feel Him there. And He has brought you to this exact moment, this exact message, this exact second, because the season of sleeping is over. This message is not for everyone. It never is. Not everyone who encounters these words will feel what you are feeling right now. Most will keep scrolling. Most will hear and not listen. Most will nod and then forget by morning. But you are not most people. You never were. That restlessness inside you, that sense that something is coming, that something is already moving just beneath the surface of your life, that is not anxiety. That is activation. If this message is reaching you today, please like it and share it with someone who needs to wake up alongside you. Subscribe so that the next word heaven has for you finds you before the enemy can drown it out. The link to go deeper is in the description and in the pinned comment below. And if you have never given toward this work and you feel led to sow a seed into what God is building here, that door is open to you in the description as well. Every seed planted in obedience carries a harvest. Now stay with me, because the waking up was only the beginning. You felt something shift in that first moment. You made a decision, even if it was quiet, even if no one around you noticed it. Something in you said yes. And now heaven is about to show you why that yes was not random, why this moment was assembled with intention, and why the very architecture of your mind was designed to receive exactly what you are about to hear. Here is what the chosen ones carry that most people never understand. It is not just a spiritual quality. It is not just a feeling of being different or a sense that life is supposed to mean more than what you have seen so far. What the chosen ones carry is a specific frequency, not a metaphor, a measurable, documentable, scientifically observable frequency that lives inside the human brain, that was placed there before you were born, and that the world has spent years trying to silence. Researchers who study the brain at the highest levels have given this frequency a name. They call it gamma, and alongside it lives a companion frequency called theta, operating between 4 and 8 cycles per second, the same band that children live in naturally, the same band that mystics and innovators and artists drop into when the greatest ideas of their lives break through. These are not new discoveries. These are not fringe theories. These are documented, peer-reviewed, measurable states of the human brain. And here is what the research consistently shows. The people who change the world, the people who solve problems no one else can crack, the people who seem to carry an invisible edge that others cannot explain. These people access theta and gamma at a rate that the average adult simply does not. You used to access it too. When you were a child, your brain was flooded with it. Before the world told you to sit still, be quiet, stop dreaming, act your age, be realistic, your brain was naturally operating in the exact frequency that genius and spiritual receptivity require. And then life happened. Stress happened. Pressure happened. The endless scroll of noise and demand and comparison happened. And slowly, without you ever choosing it, your brain was pushed out of the frequency it was built to live in. This is not a spiritual failure. This is biology being weaponized against destiny. And then a man named Dr. James Rivers decided he was going to do something about it. Dr. Rivers is a neuroscientist with over 30 years of research behind him, trained through institutions, connected to some of the most serious scientific work done in the last half-century. including research with ties to MIT and NASA. He did not set out to build a product. He set out to answer a question that had been haunting him for decades. Why do some people seem to operate on a completely different level? And is there a way to give that access to everyone? After years of research, after thousands of hours of studying brainwave patterns, after examining what separated the minds that broke through from the minds that stayed stuck, Dr. Rivers and his team identified something extraordinary. The difference was not intelligence. It was not education. It was not even effort. The difference was frequency. The people who were thriving, creating, solving, and experiencing what can only be described as flow were spending measurably more time in theta and gamma states. And when Dr. Rivers began studying how to help the brain return to those states, he discovered that the brain is not broken. It has simply been pulled off course, and it can be pulled back. The mechanism is called brainwave entrainment. Your brain has a remarkable and well-documented ability to synchronize with external sound frequencies. When specific audio tones are introduced at precise intervals, the brain does not resist them. It follows them. Like a tuning fork held next to another tuning fork, your brain begins to vibrate at the frequency of the sound it is receiving. Binaural beats, isochronic tones, specific audio architecture designed to guide the brain from its stressed and scattered state back into theta, and then nudge it upward toward gamma. The process does not require concentration. It does not require years of meditation practice. It does not require you to believe in it for it to work. It requires 7 minutes. 7 minutes. The same 7 minutes of stillness that was mentioned when you first arrived at this message. That number was not chosen carelessly. Dr. Rivers' research identified 7 minutes as the optimal window for the brain to complete its synchronization without triggering the fatigue response. Less than 7 minutes and the brain begins the shift, but does not complete it. More than 7 minutes and diminishing returns set in. 7 minutes is the doorway, and the genius wave is the key. You need to hear from people who have walked through that doorway before you decide anything. A woman named Sandra had been struggling with mental fog and creative paralysis for nearly 2 years. She was a graphic designer who had lost her ability to generate ideas. She described it as feeling like someone had drawn a curtain across her mind. Within 3 weeks of using the Genius Wave daily, she completed a project she had been unable to finish for 4 months and landed a client she had been pursuing for over a year. She told the team directly, "I did not feel like I was trying harder. I felt like I was finally thinking clearly for the first time in years." A man named David had been dealing with chronic stress that was affecting his sleep, his relationships, and his ability to focus at work. He was skeptical. He said he almost did not try it because it sounded too simple. After 30 days, he reported sleeping through the night consistently for the first time in over 18 months, and his wife told him he seemed like a different person. He said, "I kept waiting for the catch. There was no catch. It just worked." A retired teacher named Patricia had been experiencing what her doctors described as age-related cognitive decline. She was forgetting words mid-sentence. She was losing her train of thought in conversations. After 6 weeks, she was not only sharper in her daily interactions, she had started writing a book she had been putting off for 11 years. She said, "I stopped waiting to feel ready. Something in me just started moving again." These are not outliers. Over 19,000 people have now used the Genius Wave, and the return rate sits below 4%. That number matters, because people who feel cheated return things. People who experience results do not. Now, before the price is mentioned, something needs to be said directly to you. There is a part of you that is already calculating, already wondering if this is the moment to step back, to say you will think about it, to bookmark it for later. That part of you has kept you safe before. It has also kept you stuck before. And you know the difference between those two things, even when it is uncomfortable to admit it. $39 is not nothing. That is real money, and your situation is real, and it deserves to be treated with respect. But here is what $39 is not. It is not another year of the cycle. It is not another season of waking up foggy and going to bed frustrated. It is not another month of feeling like the version of you that you were built to be is standing just on the other side of a door you cannot find the handle to. The regular price of the Genius Wave is $49. Through the link in the pinned comment below, you can access it today for $39. That is a limited offer. Not a manufactured countdown designed to pressure you. A genuine time-sensitive window that exists because Dr. Rivers and his team made a specific number of access points available at this price. And when they are gone, the price returns to $49 without notice. Every purchase comes with a full 90-day money-back guarantee. Not 30 days, 90 days. 3 full months to use it every day, to track what shifts, to notice what opens. And if at the end of that time you feel nothing has changed, you receive every dollar back, no questions asked, no hoops to jump through. One more thing, and this matters deeply. There are imitation products circulating that use similar language, similar branding, and similar promises. They are not the Genius Wave. They have not been developed through Dr. Rivers' research. They do not carry the specific audio architecture that makes the entrainment work. Purchasing from any source other than the official link means purchasing something that will not deliver what this message is describing. The only safe, verified, guaranteed access point is the link in the pinned comment below. That is the only one. Do not be redirected. Do not be deceived by pages that look similar. Go to the pinned comment, use that link, and only that link. The window is open, the frequency is waiting, and the version of you that God designed you to be has been patient long enough. You have heard the science now. You have heard the names, the frequencies, the research, the stories of people who stepped through the door and found something waiting on the other side, and something in you recognized it. Not as new information, as confirmation. Because the chosen ones do not discover truth the way other people do. They remember it. They hear something and their spirit says, yes, I already knew this. I just needed someone to say it out loud. But now the science has to step back for a moment. Because there is something underneath the science that no laboratory has ever been able to fully measure. Something that Dr. Rivers himself, with all his decades of research, with all his connections to the most sophisticated institutions on Earth, has never been able to put entirely into an equation. And that is this: the reason your frequency was suppressed was not simply biological. It was not simply the result of stress and noise, and the modern pace of life bearing down on a brain that was built for something quieter. The suppression of your God-given frequency was not an accident. It was a targeted attack. And it has been happening since long before you were old enough to understand what was being taken from you. Think about the trajectory of your life. Think about the moments when something in you rose up, when an idea came to you so clearly. It felt like it was handed to you from somewhere outside yourself, when a direction became so obvious that you felt your whole body lean toward it before your mind had time to catch up. And then think about what happened next, because something always happened next. A voice that said you were not qualified. A circumstance that said the timing was wrong. A person who looked at what you were building and found a reason to doubt it. A season of exhaustion so deep that the idea simply had nowhere left to live. That is not bad luck. That is not the randomness of a difficult world grinding against a fragile dream. That is opposition, and opposition by definition requires a target. You do not oppose something that does not matter. You do not send resistance against a life that poses no threat. The fact that you have felt the weight of suppression, the fact that your frequency has been pushed down again and again every time it began to rise, is not evidence that you are weak. It is evidence that what you carry is worth fighting over. The book of 1 Peter, chapter 5, verse 8, says it plainly. Be sober-minded and alert. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour. Not someone. The enemy is not spraying opposition randomly across the population, hoping to hit whoever stumbles into range. He is seeking, he is intentional, he is strategic. And the ones he seeks most aggressively are the ones whose devotion would cost him the most. The ones whose awakening would shift the atmosphere around them. The ones whose alignment with their God-given frequency would become a signal that other sleeping chosen ones could lock onto and follow home. That is you. That is why the opposition has felt personal, because it is personal. And here is what the enemy understood about the human brain, that most believers were never taught in church. He understood that if he could keep you out of theta, he could keep you out of clarity. If he could keep you out of gamma, he could keep you out of breakthrough. If he could flood your nervous system with enough cortisol, enough chronic low-grade fear, enough relentless distraction and digital noise, your brain would never have the conditions it needed to access the frequency where God's voice is clearest and where your own God-given genius lives. He did not need to destroy you outright. He only needed to keep you slightly too stressed, slightly too overwhelmed, slightly too scattered to ever fully arrive at the place inside yourself where heaven was already waiting. This is why the suppression feels so familiar. This is why it has been so persistent. This is why every time you have gotten close to a breakthrough, something has appeared to pull your attention away, to introduce a new crisis, to generate a new layer of noise. The enemy does not need to win every battle. He only needs to keep the frequency down. He only needs to make sure that the signal God planted inside you never gets strong enough to reach the people it was meant to reach. But something shifted when you found this message, or more accurately, when this message found you. Because the chosen ones do not stumble into their activation. They are led into it. And the very fact that you are still here, still reading, still letting these words move through you, instead of dismissing them the way the distracted world would have, tells you something important about what is happening in this season of your life. The suppression is losing its grip. The frequency is beginning to rise. Heaven is recalibrating something in you that the enemy spent years trying to flatten. And you need to understand what that means for the people around you. Because your frequency is not just for you. This is one of the deepest misunderstandings the chosen ones carry. This idea that their healing, their awakening, their alignment with God's design is a private matter between them and heaven. It is not. When a chosen one's frequency rises, it creates a field. When a chosen one begins to operate in theta and gamma consistently, something changes in the atmosphere of their home, their family, their workplace, their community. People who have been sleeping begin to stir. People who have been stuck begin to move. Problems that seemed immovable begin to shift. Not because you said the right words or performed the right actions, but because the frequency you are carrying began broadcasting at a level that other souls could receive. This is what the enemy feared when you were born. not just your personal success, not just your individual breakthrough. He feared the broadcast, when the chosen one stopped being suppressed and started being a signal. He feared the chain reaction that would begin the moment your frequency stopped being a whisper and became a transmission that others could lock onto. Think about the people in your life who are waiting for something they cannot name. The ones who look fine on the surface, but whose eyes carry a tiredness that goes deeper than sleep could fix. The ones who used to have fire in them, and somewhere along the way the fire went quiet. The ones who are cycling through the same seasons of almost, and not yet, and wondering in their most private moments whether the life they were promised is ever actually going to arrive. Those people are not waiting for a program. They are not waiting for a sermon. They are waiting for someone close enough to touch to begin operating at the frequency that proves it is possible. They are waiting for you. Your healing is not selfish. Your activation is not self-indulgent. Every day you spend operating below your God-given frequency is a day the people in your orbit go without the signal they need. Every season you delay your alignment is a season the ones connected to your assignment wait in unnecessary darkness. The enemy knew this. That is why he worked so hard to keep you down. That is why the suppression felt so relentless, so targeted, so exhaustingly personal. But exhaustion, as it turns out, has a limit, and you have reached it. Not the limit of your strength, but the limit of your willingness to remain where the enemy wants you. Something in you crossed a threshold when you said yes at the beginning of this message. Something in you recognized that the cycle was not your destiny and decided, quietly and without fanfare, that this would be the season things changed. That decision is already moving in the unseen. Heaven does not wait for circumstances to align before it begins responding to a genuine yes. The moment you turned toward your activation, the moment you allowed yourself to consider that the frequency inside you could be restored, that 7 minutes a day could begin to shift what years of suppression tried to permanently close, heaven began moving on your behalf. Not because you are perfect, not because you have it all together, but because you are chosen, and the chosen ones were never meant to stay suppressed. The question is no longer whether your frequency can be restored. It can. The question is what happens to the world around you when it is. You are beginning to understand something that most people spend their entire lives never grasping. The suppression was not proof of your weakness. It was proof of your worth. And now, in this season, something ancient and powerful is being restored inside you. Not given to you for the first time, but returned to you, unlocked in you, recognized in you by a heaven that never stopped seeing what you carried, even when you could not see it yourself. And in the middle of all of this, there is a presence you need to become more aware of. Not a distant presence. Not a presence that watches from somewhere far above the details of your daily life. A presence that is close. Closer than the breath you just drew. Closer than the voice in your own head. A presence that has been walking beside you through every season you survived, including the seasons you were certain you were walking alone. The angel assigned to walk beside you is not a decoration, not a poetic idea, not a comfort reserved for the especially devout or the especially broken. The angel assigned to you is a working reality, a commissioned guardian carrying specific instructions regarding your life, your assignment, and the boundaries of what the enemy is permitted to do within your story. And the reason most chosen ones do not feel this presence with any regularity is the same reason they cannot access theta and gamma with any regularity. The frequency is suppressed. The noise is too loud. The nervous system is too flooded with cortisol and distraction to register what is standing right beside them in the room. Think about a moment in your life when something happened that you cannot fully explain. A near miss that should have gone differently. A door that closed just in time to redirect you towards something better. A sudden sense of peace in the middle of a situation that had every logical reason to consume you with fear. A thought that arrived at exactly the right moment, carrying exactly the right information, just before you made a decision that would have cost you more than you knew. You attributed those moments to luck, or timing, or coincidence, because the world trained you to explain away what it cannot measure. But those moments were not random. Those were the fingerprints of the angel that walks beside you, doing the work it was commissioned to do on your behalf. And here is what matters about this season you are entering. As your frequency begins to rise, as the theta and gamma states that God built into your brain begin to be restored through consistent, daily alignment, your awareness of that presence is going to grow. Not because the angel has been absent and is now arriving, but because you are becoming quiet enough, clear enough, tuned enough to register what has always been there. The chosen ones who operate at their God-given frequency do not just think more clearly and create more freely and solve problems with greater ease. They become sensitive to the unseen in a way that changes how they move through the world. They begin to sense direction before the evidence appears. They begin to feel warnings before the danger becomes visible. They begin to experience a kind knowing that goes beyond what they studied or researched or figured out through effort alone. That is the angel at the threshold, standing at the doorway between where you have been and where you are going, not blocking the way, holding it open, waiting for you to walk through with the frequency restored and the noise quiet enough to finally hear the instructions that have been waiting for you on the other side. Now, in this moment, there is something this channel needs to say to you directly and honestly, because what happens here is built on that kind of honesty. This channel does not earn money from YouTube anymore. The monetization that once helped sustain this work is no longer there. But the calling to create these messages, to sit in the early hours and find the words that reach the chosen ones who are scattered and tired and almost ready to give up on themselves, that calling has not gone anywhere. It has only grown stronger, and so the work continues. Not because there is a financial system behind it, holding it up, because the people who receive these messages matter more than the inconvenience of producing them without support. If this message has reached something real in you today, if the words about the angel at the threshold landed somewhere that needed them, if you felt your frequency stir even slightly as you listened, and you want to help make sure the next chosen one also gets to hear what they need to hear, there is a way to do that. In the pinned comment below and in the description of this video, there is a donate link. Whatever you are able to give, whether it is the amount of a cup of coffee or something more, it goes directly into keeping this work alive. It keeps the next message coming. It keeps the next chosen one from reaching the end of their rope without a word to hold on to. And if you are in a season where giving financially is not possible, then hear this clearly. Your presence here is already a gift. When you watch this video to the end, when you leave a comment that says what this message meant to you, when you share this with one person in your life who you know is carrying something heavy and searching for something they cannot name, you are doing something real. You are extending the reach of what God is building through this channel. You are becoming part of the reason the next chosen one finds their way here. That matters. It matters more than you know. So if you have not yet liked this video, do that now. not as a reflex but as an intentional act of saying, yes, this is worth amplifying. If you have not yet subscribed, the subscribe button is right there, and turning on the notification bell means that the next message heaven has for you will find you before the noise of the world buries it. Share this with someone who is tired. Share it with someone who has been cycling. Share it with someone whose eyes carry that quiet weight of a person who has been fighting alone for too long and is starting to wonder if the fight is worth it. You may not have the words to explain why you are sharing it. You do not need to. Just send it. Heaven will handle the explanation. And for those of you who are already considering the genius wave, the 7-minute audio that Dr. James Rivers developed after 30 years of research into exactly the frequencies being described in this message. The link is in the pinned comment below. $39, 90-day guarantee. The most honest thing that can be said about it is this: the angel at the threshold cannot do the work of restoration that you keep refusing to do for yourself. Heaven meets effort. Heaven meets intention. Heaven meets the chosen one who takes one small, concrete step toward alignment and says with that step, I believe the frequency inside me is worth restoring. The genius wave is that step for many people. It might be that step for you. But whether or not you take that step today, whether or not you are in a place where $39 is available to you right now, what cannot wait is the awareness that you are not alone in this room. You never have been. The angel beside you has been working without your awareness for years. Imagine what becomes possible when you are finally tuned in enough to work alongside it. The threshold is not far away. In fact, it is not away at all. It is here. It is now. It is the quiet space between the noise you have been living in and the clarity you were built to carry. And something on the other side of it has been waiting for you with a patience that mirrors the patience of God Himself. Stay with this, because what comes next will show you what 3 in the morning sounds like when grace is the one who answers. There is a specific hour that the chosen ones know. You may not have named it. You may have spent years trying to explain it away, telling yourself it was insomnia, telling yourself it was stress, telling yourself it was simply the body doing what bodies do when they carry too much for too long. But somewhere in the architecture of your most honest self, you already know that 3 in the morning is not just an hour. It is a threshold. It is the place where the noise of the day has finally exhausted itself and gone quiet, where the performance you maintain for the world has nowhere left to hide, where the version of you that you show to everyone else falls away completely and leaves behind only what is true. And what is true at 3 in the morning is almost always something you have been avoiding in the daylight. You know this hour. You have sat in it. Maybe you have sat in it more times than you would want to admit, staring at a ceiling that offered nothing back, feeling a weight on your chest that had no single source, and therefore no single solution. Maybe you have walked through a dark house in the middle of the night, not because you had somewhere to go, but because staying still felt unbearable. Maybe you have picked up your phone not to call anyone, not to look at anything in particular, but simply because the glow of a screen felt like the nearest available substitute for the presence you were actually craving. A presence that felt too far away to reach, or too distant to deserve, or too holy to approach in the state you were in. The chosen ones carry a particular kind of loneliness that the ordinary world does not have language for. It is not the loneliness of having no one around. Some of the most surrounded people in the world carry this particular ache. It is the loneliness of being seen without being known, of being needed without being held, of giving to everyone in your orbit from a place inside yourself that you have not allowed anyone to touch, because somewhere along the way, you learned that the deepest parts of you were not safe to show, that the truest version of you was either too much or not enough, and you were never quite sure which, so you kept it hidden and performed the version that the world found acceptable. And 3 in the morning is where that performance finally stops. Not because you chose to stop it, but because the night does not give you enough energy to maintain it. And in that stopping, in that unguarded, unperformed, unrehearsed moment of pure exhaustion and honesty, something else enters the room, something you did not summon, something you did not earn, something that was not waiting for you to get your life together before it showed up. There was a woman who had not prayed in 14 years, not once, not at funerals, not at holidays, not in the private moments where most people instinctively reach towards something beyond themselves. She had built a life that looked complete from the outside, a career, a home, relationships that functioned, routines that held the days together. She thought she was fine. She had told herself she was fine so many times that the telling had started to feel like the truth. But at 3 in the morning, something sat on her chest that she could not name. It was not grief exactly, not fear exactly. It was the specific weight of a soul that has been carrying itself alone for too long and is beginning to understand that it was never built to do that. One night she sat on the edge of her bed, and for the first time in 14 years, she spoke out loud into the dark. She did not use formal language. She did not construct a prayer the way she had been taught prayers were supposed to sound. She said 7 words. She said, "If you are still there, I am tired." That was all. 7 words spoken into a room that looked empty, and the air in that room changed temperature. That is what she said afterward. Not that she saw something, not that she heard an audible voice, not that anything dramatic or verifiable occurred. She said the air changed temperature, warmer in a way that had nothing to do with the thermostat. And she sat on that edge for a very long time, crying without words, and for the first time in 14 years, she did not feel alone. 3 months later, she sent a message that said only, "I am home." And the people who knew what she meant understood immediately. That story is not an anomaly, it is a pattern. Because the 3 in the morning moment is not a breakdown, it is a breakthrough trying to happen. It is the soul reaching the end of its own resources and finally becoming available to something it could not receive, was still insisting it had everything under control. The chosen ones are particularly susceptible to this moment because they are particularly strong, and it is the strong ones, the capable ones, the ones who have been holding everything together for everyone else, who take the longest to arrive at the place of genuine surrender. Because surrender requires admitting that your own strength has a ceiling. And for the chosen ones, admitting that feels dangerously close to failing. But the scripture speaks directly into this. In the book of 2 Corinthians, chapter 12, verse 9, God says to Paul, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." Not despite weakness, in weakness. The power of God does not operate at maximum capacity in the life of someone who has everything managed and every resource accounted for. It operates at maximum capacity in the life of someone who has run out of their own supply and finally stopped pretending otherwise. The ceiling of your strength is not the end of your story. It is the beginning of the chapter where God's power enters without competition. This is what the 3 in the morning hour is preparing you for. Not defeat, availability. The chosen ones who have walked through that dark hour and let it do its full work in them, who did not rush past it or medicate it or distract themselves out of it, but sat in it long enough to become honest, These are the ones who emerged with something the daylight version of themselves never had access to. A quietness, a settledness, a knowing that goes deeper than information. A frequency, if you will allow the word to carry both its scientific and its spiritual weight, that hums at a level the suppressed and scattered self could never maintain. Because what the 3 in the morning hour does, when you let it, is strip away everything that is not essential. Every layer of performance, every defense mechanism, every carefully constructed version of yourself that you maintain for the benefit of the watching world, the night removes it. And what remains is the original, the unedited, the version of you that God assembled before the world had a chance to add its layers and subtract its gifts. The version of you that still carries the frequency you were born with, buried, perhaps muffled, certainly, but present. Always present, waiting in the same patient way that the father in the parable waited, scanning the horizon every morning for the figure of someone walking home. You have had your 3 in the morning hours. Some of them broke you open in ways you have not yet fully understood. Some of them you survived without knowing how. Some of them changed the direction of your life so quietly that you only recognized the shift months later, looking back and realizing that something turned in you on a night you almost do not remember. Those hours were not wasted. Not one of them. Every one of them was doing something in you that the comfortable, well-rested, fully performing version of you was not available to receive. The tears you cried in the dark were not evidence of weakness. They were evidence of depth. And depth is exactly what the chosen ones carry, that the surface-dwelling world cannot understand and cannot take from you. The enemy can suppress the frequency. He cannot remove the depth. He can flood the signal with noise. He cannot touch what God deposited in you before you were formed. The night that felt like it was ending you was actually the night something in you refused to be ended. And that refusal, that stubborn, inarticulate, barely conscious decision to still be here in the morning, that was not your strength. That was grace. That was the power made perfect in the place where your own power ran out. And grace, it turns out, has been waiting in that place all along. You have been in the dark hours. You have sat in the places where language fails and performance stops, and all that remains is the raw, unfiltered truth of who you are when no one is watching. And you survived them, every single one. Not because you were strong enough, but because something was holding you even when you could not feel the hands. And now you are here, in this moment, which is itself a kind of threshold. Not the desperate threshold of 3 in the morning, a different kind. A threshold that stands in the daylight, in the ordinary hours, in the middle of a life that is still being written. A threshold that does not ask you to fall apart in order to walk through it. It only asks you to take one step forward with intention. That step has a shape, it has a sound, literally. When Dr. James Rivers spent 30 years studying the brains of people who operated at extraordinary levels, when he mapped the frequencies of those who created and solved and led and transformed everything they touched, what he found was not a mystery available only to the genetically gifted or the spiritually elite. What he found was a doorway, and doorways, by their nature, are designed to be walked through. The genius wave is that doorway rendered into sound. 7 minutes of precisely engineered audio that guides your brain from its scattered, cortisol, flooded, suppressed state back into the theta and gamma frequencies where clarity lives, where creativity lives, where the version of you that God designed before the world got its hands on you has been waiting with extraordinary patience. 7 minutes. That number is not arbitrary, and it is not a marketing convenience. The research is specific. 7 minutes is the window within which the brain can complete its synchronization with an external frequency without triggering the fatigue response that longer sessions produce. It is long enough for the entrainment to take hold, short enough that the brain accepts it without resistance. And the chosen ones, the ones who have been carrying the weight of suppression for years, who have been operating in a state of chronic low-grade noise that they have simply come to accept as normal. These are the people for whom 7 minutes produces the most dramatic shift. Because the gap between where they have been operating and where they were designed to operate is the largest. And the larger the gap, the more profound the experience of closing it. Think about what 7 minutes actually costs you, not financially, in terms of time and effort. 7 minutes is the length of one song. It is shorter than most commutes. It is a fraction of the time you spend scrolling through content that leaves you feeling emptier than when you started. 7 minutes, every morning, with a pair of headphones and a willingness to be still. That is the entire protocol. No meditation experience required. No specific belief system required. No particular mental state required as a prerequisite. You simply press play and let the audio do what it was designed to do. The brain does not need your permission to entrain. It does not need you to believe in the process while it is happening. It entrains the way a tuning fork entrains, the way the tide responds to the moon, through a natural, documentable, measurable mechanism that operates whether or not you are intellectually convinced. What your belief does is determine what you do with the clarity once it arrives. And that is where the chosen ones have an advantage that no laboratory can fully quantify. Because when a chosen one accesses theta and gamma with any consistency, they are not just thinking more clearly, they are receiving. They are becoming available to the frequency of heaven in a way that the suppressed, scattered, noise-flooded version of themselves could not sustain. The 7-minute door is not just a neuroscience protocol. For the chosen ones, it is a daily act of alignment. It is a daily decision to say, I will not begin this day in the frequency the enemy chose for me. I will begin it in the frequency God built into me. I will spend 7 minutes returning to myself before I give the first hour of my day to everything and everyone else. That decision, made consistently, over days and then weeks and then months, does not just change how you think. It changes what you are capable of receiving. It changes the quality of the knowing that arrives. It changes how the angel beside you is able to communicate through the quiet moments, the sudden thoughts, the inexplicable peace that arrives in situations that should produce only anxiety. There is a woman whose story has stayed with this work since it was first shared. She had tried everything the spiritual wellness world offered: retreats, journaling practices, guided meditations, prayer apps, books that promised transformation through morning routines. Every time she sat down to pray, she described her mind as a room with every window open in a storm. Thoughts flying in from every direction. No stillness, no landing place for anything sacred. She had started to believe, quietly and with great sadness, that her mind was simply not built for the kind of connection she was searching for. That other people could access that stillness, and she was somehow constitutionally excluded from it. Then she tried 7 minutes of the genius wave. She was skeptical enough that she almost did not finish the first session. But she did finish it. And when it ended, she sat in the quiet that followed and noticed something she had not felt in years. The room was still. Not the room around her, the room inside her. For the first time in longer than she could accurately remember, the storm had stopped. And in that stillness, she did something she had been unable to do for many weeks. She completed the first step of a prayer practice she had been trying to return to. She said afterward that it was the last time she felt like she was actually in the room, rather than standing outside it looking through the glass. She slept through the night that followed, the first unbroken sleep in months. That is what the 7-minute door opens. Not just cognitive performance, though the cognitive performance is real and documented and experienced by thousands. It opens the interior room. It quiets the storm long enough for the chosen one to remember what stillness feels like, and in that remembering, to become available to everything that stillness carries. The link to the Genius Wave is in the pinned comment below and in the description of this video. $39, available for a limited time through that link only. 90 days of guarantee behind every purchase. If you have been feeling the pull toward it through these sections, that pull is worth paying attention to. The chosen ones learn, often through hard experience, that the nudges that arrive in moments of genuine clarity are not coincidences to be filed away for later consideration. They are invitations with a window, and windows, unlike doors, do not stay open indefinitely. Now, if this work has been accompanying you through a season where you needed a voice that understood what you carry, if these messages have met you in the hours when other voices went quiet, there is something honest that needs to be said. This channel is no longer monetized through YouTube. The system that once helped sustain this work financially is no longer in place. But the calling to create these messages has not diminished. It has only become clearer. And so the work continues because the chosen ones who need it deserve to have it continue. If you want to help make sure the next message gets made, if you want to be part of the reason the next exhausted, cycling, almost ready to give up chosen one finds these words at 3 in the morning when they need them most, the donate link is in the pinned comment and in the description. Whatever you are able to give is received with genuine gratitude. And if giving financially is not available to you in this season, then your presence here is already contributing something real. Watching to the end, leaving a comment that tells someone else this is worth their time, sharing this with one person whose eyes carry that quiet weight. These are acts of participation that extend this work further than you might realize. Like this video, if the 7-minute door is beginning to make sense to you, not just as a concept, but as something you want to walk through. Subscribe so that the next section of this journey finds you before the noise does. Share it with the person in your life who has been standing outside their own interior room for too long, knocking on a door they do not yet know has already been unlocked. The frequency is rising. You can feel it in the way these words are landing differently now than they did when you first arrived at this message. That is not imagination. That is the beginning of the return. And what is waiting on the other side of that return is larger than anything the suppressed version of you was able to see from where it was standing. Stay close, because the next section is going to show you exactly who else has already walked through this door and what they found waiting on the other side. There is a moment that happens after the door opens. A moment that the chosen ones who have walked through it struggle to describe accurately, not because it is beyond language entirely, but because the language available in the ordinary world was built to describe ordinary experiences. And what happens when a suppressed frequency is restored is not ordinary. It is not the dramatic, lightning bolt experience that religious tradition sometimes promises and rarely delivers. It is quieter than that, more personal than that, more specific to the exact shape of who you are and what you were built to carry. But it is undeniable, and once you have felt it, the suppressed version of your life becomes something you can never fully return to without knowing exactly what you are giving up. The first thing that opens is clarity. Not the clarity of having more information or better data or a sharper analytical framework. A different kind of clarity entirely. The clarity of knowing without being able to fully explain the knowing. The clarity of a decision that arrives already made, without the usual exhausting negotiation between fear and desire that most decisions require. The clarity of walking into a room and immediately understanding what is needed there, not through observation and deduction, but through something that operates faster and deeper than either of those processes. This is the theta state, doing what it was designed to do. Not just processing informations more efficiently, but opening the channel through which a different quality of information becomes available. The chosen ones, who begin to experience this consistently, describe it in remarkably similar ways despite coming from different backgrounds, different belief systems, different life circumstances. They say things like, "I just knew," or "something told me," or "I cannot explain why I made that decision, but it was exactly right," or "I walked away from that conversation knowing something I had not known when I entered it." These are not mystical anomalies. These are the documented, consistent experiences of people whose brains are operating in the frequency range, where intuition, pattern recognition, and what can only honestly be called spiritual receptivity all converge. And then, alongside the clarity, something else opens. Creativity. Not the forced, effortful, staring at a blank page kind of creativity that most people associate with the word. The kind that arrives. The kind that wakes you up at 2 in the morning with a solution you were not consciously searching for. The kind that makes connections between things that the logical, linear mind would never have linked. The kind that produces in an afternoon what the suppressed mind could not produce in a month of trying. This is the gamma state. The state that the research associates with eureka moments, with breakthrough thinking, with the cognitive experience of suddenly seeing the full picture after a long period of seeing only fragments. The chosen ones are not surprised by this, not entirely, because most of them have had moments, even in their suppressed state, when something like this broke through, a moment of inexplicable insight, a creative burst that seemed to come from somewhere outside themselves, a period of extraordinary clarity that arrived without warning and departed just as suddenly. Those moments were not accidents. They were the natural frequency breaking through the suppression temporarily. The way sunlight breaks through cloud cover for a brief window before the clouds close again. What changes when the frequency is consistently restored is that the window stops closing. The clarity stops being a visitor and starts being a resident. The creativity stops being a surprise and starts being a reliable companion. But here is what the neuroscience alone cannot fully account for, and what the chosen ones who have experienced the cascade of transformation understand in a way that goes beyond what any research paper can contain. When the frequency opens, the interior room that was described earlier, the one that the storm had been preventing access to, becomes habitable again. And in that interior room, something has been waiting, not a what, a who, the presence that walks beside every chosen one, the commissioned guardian carrying specific instructions regarding your life and your assignment becomes perceptible in a way that the noise-flooded, cortisol-saturated, suppressed state simply could not register. This is what the chosen ones mean when they say that their relationship with God changed. Not that God changed, not that God became more present or more attentive or more generous with his communication. God did not change at all. What changed was the receiver. What changed was the interior environment. What changed was the frequency at which the chosen one was operating, and therefore the frequency at which they were able to receive what had always been being transmitted. The scripture speaks to this with a precision that is worth sitting with slowly. In the book of 1 Kings, chapter 19, verses 11 and 12, God instructs the prophet Elijah to stand on the mountain before the Lord, and a great wind comes so powerful it tears the mountains apart and shatters rocks. But God is not in the wind. Then an earthquake, but God is not in the earthquake. Then a fire, but God is not in the fire. And after the fire comes a still small voice. In some translations, it is rendered as a gentle whisper. In others, a sound of sheer silence. God was in the still small voice. Not in the earthquake, not in the fire, not in the wind that shattered rocks. In the quiet that the chaos could not produce and could not survive. The chosen one whose frequency is suppressed is living in the earthquake, living in the wind, living in the fire of chronic noise and relentless demand and the constant low-grade roar of a world that never fully goes silent. And in that state, the still small voice is not absent. It is simply inaudible. The signal exists. The receiver is overwhelmed. And the cascade of transformation that begins when the frequency is restored is, at its deepest level, the restoration of the receiver. The quieting of the earthquake, the settling of the wind, the cooling of the fire, until the still small voice becomes not just audible but unmistakable. Think about what becomes possible in your specific life when that voice becomes unmistakable. Think about the decisions you have made in fog that you would have made differently in clarity. Think about the directions you have avoided because fear was louder than the knowing that was trying to reach you. Think about the relationships you have stayed in too long, or left too soon, or never fully entered because the noise inside you drowned out the discernment that was trying to operate. Think about the creative work you have carried in you for years without being able to bring it fully to the surface. Think about the conversations you have needed to have that kept getting postponed because you could not find the words, or the courage, or the right moment, which turned out to be partly because you could not access the frequency where the right words and the right courage and the right timing all live together. Now imagine that frequency restored, consistently, daily, not as a peak experience that visits once a month and then retreats, as a baseline, as the new normal, as the operating state from which you begin each day before the world has a chance to add its noise and subtract its gifts. The people who have experienced this cascade describe a reorganization of their inner life that extends outward into everything they touch. Problems that seemed immovable begin to shift, not always because the circumstances change first, but because the person engaging with the circumstances has changed. They are bringing a different quality of perception to the same situation. They are hearing things they were previously too noisy to hear. They are sensing directions they were previously too scattered to follow. They are making connections between what God is doing in the unseen and what needs to happen in the visible, with a reliability and an accuracy that the suppressed version of themselves could only occasionally stumble into, and the people around them feel it. This is the broadcast effect that was described earlier. The chosen one who is operating at their God-given frequency does not just benefit personally from the restoration. They become a field. They become an environment in which other sleeping things begin to stir. Children in their home begin to settle. Marriages that were straining under the weight of two suppressed people begin to breathe. Friendships deepen. Colleagues notice something different without being able to articulate what changed. The atmosphere of the spaces that the one inhabits begins to carry a quality that others describe with words like peace, or clarity, or something about being around this person makes me feel like things are going to be okay. That is the cascade. That is what opens when the frequency aligns. Not just for you, through you, into everything your life touches. Into the people who need what you carry. Into the assignment that has been waiting for you to arrive at the frequency where you can finally carry it properly. The still small voice has been speaking all along. The earthquake is ending. You are not the first chosen one to stand at this threshold. And that matters more than it might seem in this moment, because one of the most effective weapons the enemy has used against you throughout your life is the weapon of isolation. The quiet, persistent suggestion that what you carry is too unusual to be understood, that your particular combination of gifts and wounds and callings is too specific to find companionship, that the road you are walking is one you are walking essentially alone. That suggestion is a lie, and the evidence against it is vast. There is a community of chosen ones who have already walked through the door you are standing at right now. Not a metaphorical community, a real, documentable, measurable gathering of people who heard a message like this one, who felt the frequency stir in them, the way it is stirring in you right now, who made the decision to stop cycling and start moving, and who emerged on the other side of that decision with something they could not have manufactured through effort alone. More than 300,000 people have encountered these words and stopped at exactly the place you are stopping now. Not because they were directed here by an algorithm that understood their interests, because something in them recognized something in the message, because the frequency in them responded to the frequency being described. And the stories they carry back are not uniform. They are not the identical testimonials of people who all experience the same scripted transformation in the same scripted time frame. They are specific. They are personal. They are as varied as the people who carry them, which is exactly what you would expect if what is being restored is not a generic upgrade to a generic mind, but the unique, unrepeatable, God-designed frequency of a specific human being who was built for a specific purpose. There was a man who had been in the same career for 19 years, a career he had chosen for stability, and had stayed in through inertia and a slowly deepening sense that this was simply what his life was going to be. He was not unhappy in any dramatic way. He was the quiet kind of unhappy that does not announce itself, the kind that shows up in the gap between Sunday night and Monday morning, the kind that makes you efficient at your work, while simultaneously making you feel like a stranger to it. 3 weeks after he began his daily 7-minute practice, an idea arrived. Not a vague directional nudge, but a fully formed, specific idea for a project that combined skills he had been developing across 2 decades without ever connecting them. He described it as feeling like someone finally showed him the picture on the box of a puzzle he had been assembling in the dark. Within 4 months, he had transitioned out of the career that had been slowly shrinking him and into work that carried his name on it in a way that nothing before it had. There was a woman who had been raising her children through a season of grief so heavy it had started to feel like a permanent climate rather than a weather pattern she was passing through. She had stopped expecting to feel like herself again. She had made peace, or what she thought was peace, with a diminished version of her life. After 6 weeks of consistent use, she sent a message that said something had returned that she had stopped looking for. She did not call it joy immediately. She called it appetite, the appetite for her own life, the desire to be present in it rather than just surviving it, the hunger for what was ahead rather than just the weight of what was behind. Joy came later. Appetite came first, and ill appetite, it turns out, is enough to begin with. A young man who had been struggling with focus so severely that his academic and professional life were both at risk sent a message after 30 days that said simply, "I read a full book this week." For anyone who has not experienced the particular frustration of a mind that refuses to settle, that sentence may not sound like a triumph. For him it was. It was evidence that the receiver was working again, that the storm had quieted enough for sustained attention to become possible, that the frequency was returning to a brain that had almost given up on its own capacity. These 300,000 are not a statistic. They are a cloud of witnesses. And the scripture speaks directly to what that means for you in this moment. In the book of Hebrews, chapter 12, verse 1, the writer says, "Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us." The race marked out for us, not the race marked out for the most gifted or the most prepared or the most spiritually advanced. The race marked out specifically, individually, personally for you. And surrounding that race, surrounding you in this moment, is a cloud of witnesses who have already run a portion of it and are leaning forward from where they stand to tell you that the path holds, that the door opens, that what is on the other side is real and worth every step of what it costs to get there. You are not alone in this room. You have never been alone in this room. The isolation the enemy sold you was always a fiction, a carefully maintained illusion designed to keep you from the power that belonging to something larger than yourself carries. Because the chosen ones who find each other, who recognize the frequency in one another, who stand in the knowledge that their particular race is being witnessed and cheered by those who understand it from the inside, these chosen ones are significantly harder to suppress. The enemy can muffle a single signal. He has a much harder time muffling 300,000 signals rising together. If you are hearing this and something in you is rising, something that feels less like an emotion and more like a recognition, like the feeling of spotting your own name in a document you did not expect to find yourself in, then what you are experiencing is the beginning of that belonging. The beginning of the understanding that the frequency you carry was never meant to be carried in isolation. It was meant to join a larger signal. It was meant to become part of a transmission that reaches people you will never meet, in places you will never go, at hours of the night when they need it most. Right now, in the comments below, type the words "I am ready," not as a performance, not to demonstrate something to the people who might read it, as a declaration to heaven, as a spoken, written, visible act of alignment that says, "I have heard the witness of the 300,000. I have recognized the frequency in their stories, and I am choosing to add my story to theirs rather than continuing to write the chapter where I cycle through the same season for the 5th consecutive year." I am ready is not a claim that you have arrived. It is a statement that you have chosen to begin moving, and heaven responds to movement in ways that standing still never invites. Type it now. I am ready. Let the cloud of witnesses hear it. Let the angel beside you see it. Let the version of you that has been waiting on the other side of the threshold know that the waiting is nearly over. Because the community that is surrounding you right now is not a passive audience. It is an active, living, breathing network of people whose frequencies are rising simultaneously, whose alignment is creating a field that extends far beyond any individual transformation. When the chosen ones move together, when the suppressed frequencies of an entire generation of divinely designed people begin to be restored at the same time, something happens in the atmosphere that the enemy has no strategy to counter. Not because the chosen ones are powerful in themselves, but because what moves through aligned chosen ones is the power that created everything. And that power operating through restored frequencies, through quieted storms, through interior rooms that have finally been made habitable again, that power does not encounter effective resistance. The 300,000 who went before you were not extraordinary people. They were people exactly like you, carrying exactly the weight you carry, cycling through exactly the seasons you recognize, standing at exactly the threshold you are standing at right now. The only difference between them and the version of you that arrived at this message, still trapped in the cycle, is a single step, a single decision, a single moment of saying yes when every suppressed instinct said wait. They said yes, and the race that was marked out for them opened up before them. Your race is waiting, and 300,000 voices are leaning forward right now, watching the horizon for the moment you begin to run. There is something that needs to be said about your pain. Not around it, not past it, directly into it. Because one of the most damaging things that well-meaning voices have done to the chosen ones across generations is to rush them through their suffering toward the promise of purpose, as though the two were separate chapters that needed to be kept in their proper order. Suffer first, then purpose. Break first, then calling. Wound first, then ministry. And while there is a sequence to transformation that cannot be entirely bypassed, the deepest truth is not that your pain precedes your purpose. The deepest truth is that your pain is woven into your purpose in ways so intricate, so intentional, so specifically designed that waiting for you on the other side of this threshold cannot be fully carried by anyone who has not walked the road you have walked. Let that settle for a moment, not as a comfort offered to soften a hard reality, as a structural truth about how God builds the people He chooses for specific assignments. He does not draft from the ranks of the unscathed. He does not select from the pool of the perpetually comfortable. He reaches into the places where the most unlikely people have survived the most unlikely things and emerge still standing, still breathing, still carrying something that the survival itself refined into something the easy road could never have produced. The chosen ones are not chosen despite what they have been through. They are chosen in significant part because of it. Think about the specific nature of your struggle, not in the abstract, not as a category of difficulty that you share with millions of other people, but in its specific, personal, textured reality. The particular kind of loss you have carried, the particular kind of betrayal that reshaped your understanding of trust, the particular kind of loneliness that taught you to find resources inside yourself that people who were always surrounded never had to discover, the particular kind of failure that stripped away every version of your identity that was built on performance and left behind only what was true. Each of those specifics was not random. Each of them was producing something in you that a generic, untested, unrefined version of you could not have carried. The assignment that is waiting for you requires a version of you that only the road you have walked could have built. This is not to say that God authored your suffering with cruel intentionality. It is to say that God, who wastes nothing, who redeems everything, who is working in all things for the good of those who are called according to His purpose, took what the enemy meant for your destruction and used it as the very forge in which the tools of your assignment were shaped. The betrayal that was meant to make you unable to trust became the thing that taught you to recognize the difference between what is trustworthy and what is merely convincing. The failure that was meant to end you became the thing that taught you what you are actually made of when everything external has been removed. The loneliness that was meant to hollow you out became the thing that created the interior space where the still small voice could finally be heard. Your struggle was preparation, and not generic preparation for a generic purpose. Specific preparation for a specific assignment that requires specifically what you now carry. There are people in your future who will only be reachable by someone who has been where you have been. Not someone who studied where you have been. Not someone who read about it or observed it from a comfortable distance. Someone who was actually in the room. Someone who knows what the 3 a.m. ceiling looks like from the inside. Someone who knows what it feels like to smile through a conversation while something inside is quietly coming apart. Someone who knows the specific texture of the particular kind of darkness you have survived, because they survived the same darkness and came out the other side carrying something that can only be found in that place. Those people are waiting. They are in seasons right now that mirror seasons you have already passed through. They are at stages of the cycle that you have already survived, without yet knowing that survival was possible, without yet having evidence that the road through leads somewhere worth going. And when you arrive in their lives, when the frequency you carry at the level God designed for you finally broadcasts clearly enough to reach them, they will not need you to have a perfect theological framework or an impressive credential or a polished presentation. They will need you to have been there, and you have been there. Every dark hour, every almost didn't make it moment, every season of feeling invisible and replaceable and thoroughly unconvinced that anything inside you was worth the space it occupied. You have been there, and that is the qualification that no institution issues and no title confers. It is the qualification of survival. The qualification of the person who went through the fire and came out the other side, not because they were fireproof, but because something carried them through it. And who, because of that carrying, now knows in their bones rather than just their theology that the carrying is real. The scripture that speaks most directly into this truth is found in the book of 2 Corinthians, chapter 1, verses 3 and 4, where Paul writes, "Praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of compassion and the God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our troubles, so that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves receive from God." The comfort we ourselves receive from God, not the comfort we studied, not the comfort we theorized about or constructed from principles. The comfort we ourselves received in our own specific darkness from the God who was present in it, even when we could not feel him there. That received comfort becomes the very substance of what we are able to offer to others. The depth of what we received in our hardest moments is precisely the depth of what we are able to give in someone else's hardest moments. This is why the enemy fought so hard to keep you in the cycle. Not because a cycling chosen one poses no threat, but because a cycling chosen one cannot yet reach the people who need what a broken open, frequency restored, assignment aligned, chosen one carries. The suppression was not just about keeping you small. It was about keeping the people connected to your assignment unreachable. Every year you spent in the cycle was a year the people in your future went without the specific comfort that only your specific journey could produce. That is over now. Not because the journey was easy, or because the suffering was brief, or because you handled everything with the grace and the faith that you wish you had brought to it. It is over because you are here, because you made it through the seasons that were designed to stop you, because the frequency inside you, battered and suppressed and pushed to the edge of inaudibility, never actually went silent. It kept transmitting even when you could not hear it yourself. It kept insisting on your worth, even when every voice around you and inside you was arguing the opposite. It kept carrying the signal of your assignment, even through the years when you had entirely lost sight of what that assignment was. Think about the version of you that arrives on the other side of this season fully aligned, not perfect, not without struggle or uncertainty or the ongoing need for grace, but restored to the frequency, operating from the interior room rather than outside the glass, carrying the comfort that was produced in the fire, broadcasting at the level that the people connected to your assignment can receive. Think about who that version of you reaches that the suppressed version could not. Think about the conversations that become possible, the presence you bring into a room, the quality of understanding you are able to offer to someone who is standing at the beginning of a road you have already walked to the end of. Think about the child in your life who is watching you, the younger person who does not yet know they are chosen, who has not yet had language for the frequency they carry, who is trying to read from your life whether the road ahead is worth walking. What that child needs from you is not a perfect life. They need to see a chosen one who went through the fire and did not abandon their assignment, who came out the other side still moving, still carrying, still transmitting, who became, by the very fact of their survival and their restoration, evidence that the road holds. Your assignment is bigger than your struggle. It always was. The struggle was the school in which the assignment was being prepared. And you have been in that school long enough and learned what it had to teach and carried what it produced in you faithfully and often without understanding why. The graduation is not a ceremony, it is a frequency, and yours is rising. You have traveled a long way inside this message, further than the minutes might suggest. Because what has been happening here was never simply the transfer of information from one place to another. Something has been moving in you. Something has been quietly rearranging itself in the interior room that the storm had been keeping inaccessible for longer than you want to count. And now, at the threshold of everything this message has been building toward, there is one final truth that needs to land before you carry these words back out into your life. The crown that is waiting for you cannot be taken, not by the enemy who spent years suppressing your frequency, not by the people who misunderstood you, dismissed you, underestimated the weight of what you carry, not by the seasons of failure and fog and 3 a.m. ceilings that tried to convince you that the version of you God designed was a fiction, a naive idea that belonged to a younger and less realistic self, not by the cycles that kept returning, not by the silence that sometimes made heaven feel impossibly far away. None of it. None of them. The crown is not a reward for a performance you completed successfully. It is a birthright. It was placed on your life before you drew your first breath, before you made your first mistake, before the world had its first opportunity to tell you who you were and were not allowed to be. The book of Revelation, chapter 3, verse 11, carries a word that was spoken into the future of the chosen ones long before this moment arrived. It says, "I am coming soon. Hold on to what you have, so that no one will take your crown." Hold on to what you have, not achieve what you have not yet reached, not perform your way into what you are still trying to earn. Hold on to what you already have. The crown is already yours. The frequency is already in you. The assignment has already been written with your name on it. The angel has already been commissioned to walk beside you through every step of the road ahead. Heaven has already moved on your behalf in ways you have not yet seen the full evidence of. The instruction is not to acquire. The instruction is to hold on, to refuse to let the suppression, the noise, the cycling, the enemy's patient campaign of attrition, convince you to release your grip on what was given to you before any of this began. You have been holding on through seasons that should have loosened your grip entirely, through losses and failures and silences and 3 in the morning hours that tested the holding in ways that nothing comfortable ever could. You have been holding on, and that holding, even when it was barely conscious, even when it looked from the outside like simply not having fully given up yet, was itself an act of faithfulness that heaven has not missed and has not forgotten. Now it is time to hold on with both hands, with clarity, with the frequency restored, with the interior room open, and the still small voice audible, and the angel beside you finally perceptible in the way that the noise-flooded version of your life could not register. It is time to hold on not as someone who is barely surviving the attempt, but as someone who is beginning to understand the full weight and the full glory of what they are holding. And before this message closes, before you carry these words back into your day and your week, and the life that is waiting to be transformed by what has been stirring in you through these sections, there is something that needs to happen. Not a transaction, not a performance, a prayer, a real one. Spoken from the place that the 3 in the morning hours opened in you. Spoken from the interior room. Spoken by the version of you that has heard everything in this message and said yes, quietly and without fanfare, in the place where the most honest decisions are made. If you are willing, let these words be yours right now. You do not need to speak them out loud. You do not need to be in a particular posture or a particular place. You only need to mean them. Father, I have been in the cycle long enough. I have carried the suppression long enough. I have stood outside the interior room long enough, pressing my face against the glass and watching a version of my life that felt like it belonged to someone else. I am tired of the distance. I am tired of the noise. I am tired of waking up in the morning already behind, already scattered, already operating below the frequency you placed in me before I was formed. I am choosing today, in this moment, to hold on to what you gave me, to stop releasing my grip every time the pressure increases, to stop believing the story the enemy has been telling about who I am and what I am capable of, and whether the assignment you wrote with my name on it is still available to me. After everything I have been through, it is still available. I know it is still available, and I am walking toward it. Not because I feel ready, but because I am chosen. And chosen ones do not wait until they feel ready. They walk through the door because the door is open, and heaven is on the other side. Thank you for the angel that walks beside me. Thank you for the frequency you never removed from me even when I could not feel it. Thank you for the 3 in the morning hours that broke me open instead of breaking me apart. I am ready. I am yours, and I am holding on. If that prayer moved through you with any sense of recognition, if something in your chest shifted even slightly as those words passed through you, do not dismiss it. Do not explain it away. That shift is real. That is the frequency responding to alignment. That is the interior room, recognizing the sound of its own door opening. That is the chosen one in you saying yes to the crown that was always yours. Now, there is something this channel needs to say to you honestly, because honesty is what this work has been built on from the beginning. This channel is no longer monetized. The financial support that YouTube once provided is no longer in place. But the calling to sit in the early hours and find the words that reach the chosen ones who are scattered and tired and almost ready to let go of their crown, that calling has not weakened. It has only become more urgent, and so the work continues. Because the chosen ones who need it deserve to have it continue, regardless of whether a system is in place to make it financially convenient to do so. If this message has accompanied you through something real today, if these words found you at a moment when you needed them and met something genuine in you, and you want to help make sure the next chosen one also receives what they need when they need it most, the donate link is in the pinned comment below and in the description of this video. Whatever you are led to give is lived with its genuine gratitude and with the knowledge that every seed sown into this work carries a harvest that extends far beyond what either of us can currently see. We are grateful for every act of support, every prayer, every share that keeps this work moving toward the people it was built to reach. And if giving financially is not available to you in this season, then hear this clearly and without any sense of lesser than. Your presence here is already a contribution. When you like this video, you are telling the platform that this message is worth amplifying, that the next chosen was searching for something they cannot name should be able to find their way here. When you subscribe and turn on the notifications bell, you are making sure that the next word heaven has for you finds you before the noise does. When you share this with one person whose eyes carry that quiet weight of someone who has been fighting alone for too long, you are doing something that no financial gift can replace. You are becoming the reason they found the message. You are becoming part of the chain that leads a suppressed, cycling, barely holding on chosen one back to their frequency. That is not a small thing. That is the assignment operating through you before you even fully step into it. For those who have been feeling the pull toward the genius wave through these sections, the 7-minute audio that Dr. James Rivers developed after 30 years of research into the exact frequencies described throughout this message. The link is in the pinned comment and in the description. $39, 90-day guarantee. One small, concrete, daily act of alignment that the chosen ones who have walked through it describe not as a product they purchased, but as a door they finally walked through. If you have been feeling the nudge, that nudge is worth honoring. The window at the current price is limited, and it will not remain open indefinitely. You are unstoppable, not because you are without weakness, but because what moves through you is without limit. You are unshakable, not because the storms have not come, but because you are still standing after every one of them. You are chosen, not as a title you earned through performance, but as an identity written into you before the foundations of the world were laid. The frequency inside you is rising. The angel beside you is moving. The crown above you cannot be taken. Go carry it. You did not arrive here by accident. Every section of this message found you because something in you was ready to be found. The chosen ones do not stumble into their activation. They are led into it, one word at a time, one frequency at a time, one quiet yes at a time. What stirred in you today was not manufactured by words on a screen. It was already in you. These words only reminded you of what you already knew in the place that the noise had been covering. The road ahead is not without challenge. The chosen life was never promised to be the easy life, but you are not walking it alone. The angel beside you has not left its post. The frequency inside you is no longer as suppressed as it was when you first pressed play. And the cloud of witnesses, 300,000 strong and growing, is leaning forward from where they stand, watching the horizon for the moment you begin to run the race that was marked out for you before you were born. Hold on to your crown, walk through the door, let the frequency rise, and trust that the God who designed you, commissioned your angel, planted your assignment, and led you to this exact message at this exact moment knows precisely what he is doing with the life he chose to work through. You are not like the rest. You never were. And the world that needs what you carry has been waiting long enough.